So I understand there's a lot of people here who aren't from Cornwall, which is, so welcome to Cornwall. Check the view out. Yeah, I'm going to spend the next half hour talking about what I do in the business I set up. But fundamentally it's about principle, really. Has anyone heard of the circular economy? Brilliant, that's good. So I'm going to talk about us and then the circular economy and how we fit in with the circular economy, specifically circular design. And then from that I'm going to show a few examples, and then I'm hoping by the end of half an hour I'll also share some tips on how you guys can take that away. Not only learn from the principles, but how could you implement that within your business, and just as importantly how you could implement that with other people's businesses and individuals. That's my aim, that I want you all to go away thinking, one, I understand it, two, I see the reason for it, and three, I'm going to do something about it, and I've got the tools to initially go away and do that. So, 16 years ago, I was working for Dyson, a vacuum cleaner company in Malmesbury, near Swindon. My background is product design. I studied it at Loughborough, then kind of went from there to Dyson. And I spent sort of 4 or 5 years there designing products for James, which had its ups and downs. He's an interesting character. But primarily, I have to say, a great person to work for, a great company to work for. From a design perspective, it couldn't really get any better. There was virtually a limitless budget. There was 1,000 design engineers in one building, all looking at different concepts, ideas. There was no kind of, interestingly, no structure behind it. If you came up with a great idea, there literally was a futures team, and they could come up with anything they wanted. There were no boundaries. I've never worked or heard of a company or dealt with a company that have that kind of limitless R&D perspective. So it was an amazing place to work for that. And then I sort of ended up in charge of taking those concepts and trying to effectively make them work and be commercial in the big world, big wide world out there, which arguably is the hard bit, to be honest, as we all know. So coming up with an idea is one thing, getting it to actually work is a different thing altogether. And hence, 16 years on from now, that's kind of what I do for a living. So I left Dyson and thought, you know what, I think I could do my own mini Dyson, or I want to do my own mini Dyson. But the primary reason for doing that, and apologies, I've got no slides at all today, so it's just me. I've got some products to show you. But I had 2 objectives when I left Dyson. One, I wanted to live a short walk from that, the sea, the ocean. Swindon is a little bit landlocked. I was a sea lover, so I spent all my weekends driving to the coast, and I was like, I desperately want to live by the sea. I didn't even grow up by the sea, I grew up near Swindon. I think the closest I got to water was like the odd lake here and there, but for some reason I had it in my head. So I set up a company called A Short Walk, and that's the reason, to be a short walk from the sea. That was my own personal primary objective. But when I set the business up, 16 years ago, I wanted to make products from waste. And I think that came out from 2 things. One, just an individual personal desire, and 2, technically. Working for Dyson, I realised that actually a lot of products could be made from waste. There was technically not a lot in the way, other than there's always barriers, and everyone will come up with barriers. Every time you set up a business or do a business or try and engage with businesses, there's always barriers. And it's about breaking those barriers down, and actually a lot of them are easy to break down. You actually break it, when you look at it, barriers that actually break it down, it's a lot easier than you think. So I thought, right, I'm going to do it. So I came down, set up the company in my shed. I lived in a shed for 2 years, with just me, myself, and I keep them. It was good company actually. I was quite interested. Great conversation, no arguments, no HR issues. Well, and then from there, I set about. That was literally with 1 or 2 products, and then now I'm going to whisk on for 16 years later. So here we are now. So all we've done for that 16 years is build products out of waste materials. But over that period of time, we've obviously built up a big network of people that we use in terms of research and R&D, universities, local universities. We now design and make 50 odd different products, all from waste materials, and then we distribute globally. And then probably half of our business is actually working for other big corporates to look at their waste streams. So our model is that we'll go to a corporate and say, let's analyse your waste streams. We'll then actually take those waste streams away from you, which one solves a big problem for them and saves them money. And then we'll turn that waste into products that then you take. That's our model. We don't charge for any design work. We don't charge for any time. We just say, if you come up with products that still fit within your infrastructure and what you want, then you have to take them. Now, the way we do that is just to be clever about design. So we pick products that we know, one, technically can do, but two, fall into categories that they obviously got. When I talked about barriers, one of the key things is to effectively make it a win-win for them. And the one I mean by a win-win is that you're taking their waste and you're giving them back products that don't cost anymore, functionally are just as good as the products they're already using, and then it gives them a great story. So you just have to get to that point where, like, well, why wouldn't we do it? It's a complete win for us. So that's our model. So now we work with literally from Unilever to McDonald's to, there's a big list of companies that we work for and consult for with that model in mind. So that's kind of us, but what I want to waver on more today is kind of what our principles are, and they centre around this thing called the circular economy that a lot of people have heard about and has been in the academic world for probably 15 plus years. And put really simply, and it's a complex issue, the circular economy. It's a big beast because it covers a lot of spectrums, a lot of sectors, a lot of products, a lot of materials, a lot of people, a lot of industry, but it's fundamentally about turning today's waste into tomorrow's product. And when we talk about that, you know, we've heard a lot of stats, but there's some that stick out for me. You know, we produce 340 million tonnes of plastic every year in this world, and 2% of it gets reused a second time, which is alarming and shocking and annoying, because technically all of it could be reused. Just about every single plastic, there's a few exceptions of bizarre composites for the aeronautical industry, but 98% of all plastic could be reused and turned into other products, yet 2%. And there's lots of reasons for that, and I'll go into that. But the other aspect of why we have to take today's waste and use it for tomorrow's product is just, it's not rocket science to know we're going to run out of all our resources. Shell last year did a report to say, well, actually gas and oil by 2050 is going to be, we're going to be running out within 30 odd years, which is, you know, it's not the next generation's issue, it's ours. And market forces mean 10 years before we run out, the oil price is going to be so hugely high that probably we can't make anything out of it anyway. So it's literally knocking on our door and something we need to start doing. And we talk about what's been incredible over the last 5 years is the awareness. 5 years ago, probably most of us in this room might not have heard of the circular economy, and we didn't think hugely about waste. And when we put our recycling out, well, where does it go? Or when I put that in the bin, what's happened to it? Or even the value of waste. Most people talk about it as litter, when personally there shouldn't be such a word as litter, because there's no such thing. It's all got value. So people need to just be into that mindset from children upwards of whatever I have in my hand has value, and I need to capture it and treat it with value. Other sort of Nordic companies are brilliant at that. Countries. They have a different culture entirely, and that's been inbred by recycling structures they have over there that breed value. People see value, whether it's tangible, like deposit return schemes, where actually, yeah, my bottle has a 10p value, and I get that, and I realise that. But what that does is change people's mindset about everything else. It's not just the bottle, it's not just about the bottle. So I think the other aspect, when we talk about an awareness campaign, is that brings lots of positives. An ocean plastic, the ocean right there. Ocean plastic is like the visual element of the issue, isn't it, the problem? It's the very visual thing, and in a bizarre kind of way, it's a good thing, because it's woken the world up, because you can visually see it, when it's only really the tip of the iceberg globally about what the big issue is around resource and waste and management of that, and returning it back. So the last 50 years, since effectively the Second World War, when the Americans came up with the mass consumption model, we've not thought about it. It's just been a linear, we talk about a linear approach. So the linear approach to our economy has been take, make and dispose. So we take it out of the ground, we make something, and then we dispose of it back into the ground. We don't think much more beyond that. So the circular economy is about bending that linear line so that it that dispose element, it never gets to there. It just, we take and then we just keep recycling and reusing time and time again. When we talk about the awareness campaign, my personal worry is that there's a huge opportunity. The whole world, from government level down to individual consumers, is aware now and thinking we need to do something about this horrendous problem. So we'll never be in a better place to start doing something. But at the moment, the slight frustration is there's not many solutions. There's huge talk about the problem, but how many of you really have heard about tangible, physical, practical solutions coming through that make you think, oh, there's something I can get on board with? That's my frustration. And there are arguably, and this is arguably, solutions that we do lots of cafes because of one product that we do, and a lot of cafes are thinking, well, what do I do about it? And lots of them are sort of jumping on compostables. Let's do compostables because, in theory that works. That's a lot greener than a conventional paper cup that can't be recycled, or biodegradable. When actually both of those concepts are still fundamentally linear. They're still turning energy and resource and waste and degrading it down into something you can't ever then recapture. So if we switch both those models tomorrow, we're still going to eventually run out. And I know that's a very big overview brush of it, but for me personally, and the way we run our business, we think the future has to be circular. It's got to be. And with that in mind, we have the 3 R's, reduce, recycle, what's the third one? Reuse. Thank you. And I noticed there's lots of reused cups today, which is brilliant, so congratulations. There should be a 4th, really, of rethink, because we're still in a mindset where we need to rethink about waste and value, and the perception of what is recycling. So everyone says, if I said to you, or a big audience, and said, who recycles? Most people would put their hand up. And then I say, well, who consciously buys products made from waste? And I can tell you 2% would probably put their hand up. And that's the problem, because nothing is truly recycled until you reuse it. And lots of people forget that, from the public to big business, to even the government, to be honest. So let's get on to the circular economy and the principles of that. And I talked about the overarching umbrella of it's about using today's waste for tomorrow's product. But when it comes to the specific sector we work in, which is product design, there's 3 core elements to it. And that is, every product you produce, in theory, and this is what you aim for, has to be made from 100% recycled content. Once you've achieved that, then every product you design has to be designed for longevity. That's key. Single use is evil, and it's about longevity. And then thirdly, once it eventually comes to its end of life, and we really mean eventually, then it's 100% recyclable, so it can just be passed on to the next product. And when you break it down, they're the key elements really, and that's what we designed too as a business. There's other interesting models. Has anyone heard of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation? So I class them as the pioneers of circular design, a circular economy, and they're a great resource, and I recommend everyone to go and have a look at their website. But they're literally at European policy level influencing what's going to happen in the next 20 years. But they talk of a model of renting or leasing. So at the moment we tend to buy everything. So if you use a washing machine as an example, we buy a washing machine, and I'm going to pick on, say, Bosch. Bosch will design it to break after 5 years because they want you to buy another washing machine. So what if we insisted on a leasing or a renting model and said, I'm only going to lease and rent this off you, Mr. Bosch. Straight away, literally straight away, Bosch will be sat in a design office thinking, well, if people are going to rent these things, we need to start designing them to last a lot longer than 5 years, otherwise that's going to cost us a huge amount of money. So straight away they flick to a different mindset, and they're thinking, right, how do we design this washing machine so it will last 10, 15 years? And then if there is a fault, it's easy to rectify. An engineer can go out and just take this bit off and get to that. We know how problematic modern cars are when your bulb goes and you have to take it to the garage because you can't get in there. So everything's sort of gone down that route of complexity, and they're not designing for end of use, they're not designing for serviceability. So their mindset would change. And then interestingly, what happens when eventually that 15-year-old washing machine packs up and you say, look, I want to rent a different model now, Bosch have to take it back. So again, it's in their interest to design it for recyclability. And there might be, me as a designer, you'd be there thinking, well, are there core components we could just take out of that and reuse for the next washing machine that don't matter? They're not visual. Are there materials that we could just take out? We know we can easily recycle that. So that's a really simple model that can be consumer-led, that would force companies to start thinking circular. I'm going to use another example of the values of circular design with one of the products we do. Actually, I'll just quickly bear with me. So here's some examples of some products we do. So that's an indoor, we do a big range of indoor and outdoor pots, but that's made from PET milk bottles. But we add a little bit, there's 5% stone powder in there, so it gives it that sort of earthy stone look. So from where you're probably sitting, it probably does look like an earthy based material, where actually it's all pretty much. Sorry, I know it's rude to turn away. So we've got another, and I'll pass these round. So that's a product that's 70% recycled PP and 30% spent grain from the brewing industry. So when they brew beer, they're left with spent grain, and it's like millions of tons as an industry. And they tend to give it the cattle feed. Literally, a farmer will roll up at the back of the brewery and just cart it away in the back of his truck. And the EU a while back said, hang on, considering that's going into the food chain, we better tighten up on this. So the whole brewing world just suddenly panicked and said, what can we do with all this waste? So they got in touch with us and said, have you got any ideas? So that's just another example about, it's not just about plastics, it can be organic materials that you start to look and try and give a second life to. It brings me on to this product which we designed, we launched 9 months ago, called the R Cup. So it's a reusable cup, which, as we know, everyone's being urged to use these days. The difference with this is that it's actually made from the recycled paper cups. So we set up a collection scheme with a number of our partners where we go around and we collect used paper cups. And it was all reported 2 years ago now that you can't recycle them, and technically they weren't being recycled because paper mills couldn't separate the inner lining from the paper cup. And hence that was the issue. So we thought, hang on, there must be a better way of just taking the whole cup. Rather than this issue of separation, let's look at the whole cup. So we came up with a process where you can just clean and shred the cup and dry it, and then compound it with a special additive that then bonds it to a polymer. And actually, ironically, because paper cups have such a high-grade paper fibre, it's really high-quality paper in a paper cup to give it its rigidity. It's those long cellulose fibres that allow us to bond it to the polymer. So once we developed that material, we thought, what products can we make from that? Which is often a lot of the times where our R&D comes from. It's sort of you solve a waste issue and think, well, where are the logical products we could take that into? And obviously, a reusable cup was the obvious thing to do. So we launched that 9 months ago, and that's doing really, really well. And it, proof's in the pudding. Just reading, it won the Best Buy, the Which Award for the Best Buy, and that's made from waste. So it's a really wonderful thing to show people. I'm going to come on to that in terms of what is the value of circular design within the environmental issues we have at the moment. The real value of circular design, because when we talk about circular economy, it's not just about that bending that linear line and making a constant circle. Whilst you're doing that, it's imperative that you add value, and that's how a circular economy works. So I use this cup as an example. So if you're a recycling company and you go around collecting used cups and you bail them up, on the open market you used to get about £70 a tonne. It's gone up recently because Costa introduced a supplementary scheme to incentivise businesses to start recycling, which has worked, and good on Costa. If you turn it into this recycled resin that I've spoken about, then it becomes £1,500 a tonne. So we've increased the value of that waste material. And then if you turn it into a product, so once you turn it into that, it's £5,500 a tonne in real term value. So by doing that stimulated the economy. It created a demand for what was once a worthless piece of paper that no one wanted anything to do with. Suddenly there's a demand for it, and a high value demand, so industry and infrastructure starts to take a rise because people think, oh, actually there's money in it now. In pure simple terms, waste management companies think, hang on, there's value in those there dirty, horrible, worthless cups. So that's where the value of design and creating products can stimulate the economy. And that's what I mean by adding value. And then that becomes sustainable in its own right. And generally, within, as you'll know, within a business, if you can create the pull, the demand, you've generally got a sustainable business. Those businesses that just create something and then try and push it into a market are always onto a bit of a struggle. He says from experience. His tear nearly went down. So, I've got some notes and apologies. The other thing, yeah.
You asked me to give you.
I've already got to. Okay,
Well,
I'll crack on. Sorry, I do go
sorry,
on.
I
I do go on, which is why I asked you to remind me. The other big value about circular design is behaviour change. So one of the key aspects that we're up against is getting people to put their rubbish in the right bin and engage with recycling. And products are great for that. We call it the sort of the penny dropping moment. So once people realise that if they make the effort, good things do happen, then people start to engage more. You can't lecture people. You kind of all know that. You can't just tell people to start recycling because they won't. You need to be positive and engaging and inspiring, and then people naturally start to do it. So that's where products have a really, they're invaluable really. I'm going to conclude with my last 5 minutes then on how you guys could take those principles with circular economy and circular design and use it in your business and other people's businesses. So as I said at the beginning, we deal with lots of big corporates, and the way, and I have already kind of touched on it, which is great, so I don't need to keep repeating myself, but the way it's worked for big business is the win-win bit. So if you're dealing with businesses and you want to implement models with them, it's making sure you have to be honest and you need to tick their boxes, their KPIs, whoever you're dealing with, they've all got objectives, they've all got things they're being judged on. So just align your principles and your thoughts with what you know they're being judged on, whether as an individual or as a company, with their company responsibilities. Like the first thing we do is look at corporate CSR, key CSR objectives they have on their website, and every pitch we go and do just aligns to that. So I'd urge people to be realistic about who you're dealing with and what they need to do, and make it that win-win so they can't say no, and then you'll start getting some rewards, not just for you personally but for the environment. And then you as your business, what could you do? And I was having to think about this, well, what could we all do? What could we take away now and go away with? And I think it comes down to those principles I talked about. You know, if you're looking at a product, and it can be a service as well, it's like, well, I'm coming up with a concept and I have a responsibility as a maker. I mean, anyone who produces anything has a big responsibility. So it's one, recognising that and not taking it lightly. Secondly, can I make it out of recycled materials? Can I take a bit of time, a bit of research, investigate? Because it really isn't hard. With Google now, you'll soon get there. And if I'll happily hand out my details, because you just email me and ask me and I'll tell you. Because it's all about us coming together and starting to make a difference. So think about, can I make it out of recycled materials? And can I make it last as long as possible? And that is a big challenge, I recognise that, because everyone wants everything for next to nothing these days. Everyone, you know, we're still sadly in a culture of, I buy a £10 tent and leave it at a festival. So we need to get everyone out of that mindset, and it's down to you to communicate that. One, build that product to last a long time, and if it takes, you know, if it's twice as expensive, you need to communicate to your customer, whoever they are, the value of that. And it is a battle, without a doubt, because consumers are still caught in that cheap and cheerful mode. But it's happening. I think people see, if I buy a £200 tent that lasts 5 times longer, I'm actually economically better off in the long run, and I get a far better product. Think about that leasing model, which is an interesting one. We're looking at that as a company. You know, if we've got a bird feeder that's £5 because no one will ever buy a bird feeder that's more than £5, apparently, because that's what all the buyers say. what if we do it for 10, but guarantee it forever, for life? You know, these are models we're thinking about where actually that's a far better solution for everybody. And so have a think about that leasing and that longevity model and see if you can implement that perhaps. And that touches on my last point about quality. There's a great saying that the higher the quality, the lower the impact. And I think we all need to take that away today as well and think about that. So I'd say they're my top tips. I'm going to hang around and please come over and grab my card, and everybody in this room is more than welcome to badger me and email me and phone me and say, do you know a material I can make this from? Because it's 2 minutes for our company and it'd be good to help. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Ed from Tevi. Now Tevi are an organisation primarily based down here in Cornwall, but they've helped us a lot. And they are looking about, they're one of the ambassadors of Circular Economy down here. And they were the ones today who asked me to stand up and talk about what we're doing, because they're quite integral to what we do and they support everything we do. So Ed's going to talk about what they do, so hopefully it'll be really informative for everybody. Thank you very much.